here again on Mort Homme, walking down the length of a trench that it looks like possibly archaeologists had marked with engineer tape to mark a trench line. I've seen that done in documentary movies. When they come out and want to study a certain sequence, they can use the trench maps and GPS to trace the trenches through the trees with engineer tape. This looks to be pretty old tape, but I'm walking the lip of an old trench here. Tree coming up right through the middle of it, and heading generally west from Mort Homme to Cote 304. So this whole ridge I'm on would have been heavily defended and fought over. I keep running into the problem of running out of light because it's winter and the days just aren't that long for this kind of exploration. Right now it's about 4:30, and gosh, I sure don't want to give up on my hike, but I'm going to end up out here in the dark navigating by map. And so get to add to the spook factor of it all for sure. Once again, in the kind of annals of infantry fighting, this area is one that's on par or surpasses places like Hamburger Hill, Pork Chop Hill, Sugarloaf Hill, Mount Suribachi, parts of the Somme battle, of course, just other parts of World War I. But this area was one of those quintessential back and forth, trench to trench places that people visualize when they think of World War I and the Battle of Verdun. I'm kind of walking parallel to the front line, I think. That's how this road is structured here, although there's kind of a patchwork through here. And this whole area is known as a red zone, which is land so devastated by combat that it couldn't be reclaimed. But where I'm at, you can imagine, there's the entrance to a trench system right here. You can imagine German and French soldiers fighting back and forth in front of me for months. And the trail's directing me to the right here, so probably go check it out, see what we got up here. These are German tunnels, is what it's taking me up to, that they excavated into the side of the hill here. Looks like they were meant to provide some protection for the German soldiers, but they were fought over and fought within. So the subterranean fighting of the First World War is something that's not ever caught on camera. How could it be with that technology? Even now, it would be nearly impossible. You could GoPro in a situation like that, but if you were really there and turned on a light, you'd be killed. So it just doesn't exist. We'll have to imagine it. Horrifying, though. And shows like Peaky Blinders make a point of describing their lead character as a tunnel rat in the First World War. Such a scary, crazy job that he's virtually allowed to be a gangster, and Churchill's okay with that because of his service in places like this. You did your part, do whatever you want. But in real life, this war was such an industrial effort that nations would send miners to do that kind of work. It wasn't just random guys. They would often be actual miners sent to do the mining work. Once again, this terrain here is kind of still cut down. I mean, this is not replant, maybe. It looks like the trees have been cut, but it's just evident that the war is everywhere in front of me. I don't know how easy that is to see on camera. If there was a forest fire that came through here, same thing with the hills up at Verdun, and burned this area, I would want to come back and look at it the next year, because then I think it would get very close to what these people experienced. In the pictures, this just looks like a desert, so the terrain is blasted completely clean of vegetation. And that means that what it really would have looked like up here everywhere is like that. Everywhere. Everywhere. Which means if you stuck your head up out of one of these holes, you were liable to catch a bullet. Everywhere I've gone in Verdun, I've seen these little marking stakes with red on them, and some with blue, but I am very curious if that's got some particular meaning. Is that a UXO marker? Did somebody come through with some kind of metal detector, or are they just survey stakes? Because they're everywhere. They seem to be in line, but there's so many it's hard to tell. It could be, and I'm completely guessing here, that they represent chemical survey work done by foresters to see how contaminated the land is. And so possibly they walk the land, test it, and mark it. Or it could be marked for new planting. Or it could be safe zones versus no-go zones, but they're blue and red. So that's some research I'll have to do when I leave this area and have more time for that. It would have been nice to be able to read and speak French fluently before coming here, but it's not a showstopper. We have technology that takes care of a lot of that. I've done plenty of my own research on where I was going to visit before I ever came here, and so I knew enough to not just be walking through the woods with no knowledge, which is helpful. The French people in Verdun have been very kind for the most part, although we do talk about the French wanting you to know their language, and they seem to appreciate it if at least I would try French first before giving up and saying, okay, I'm an American, help me. And then they would do their best, sort of. I would say I was somewhat treated like a stray cat. Not exactly wanted, not messed with, but just kind of allowed to roam around. I think that I'm curling back towards the road now. I haven't seen, maybe I just haven't gotten to them yet, but I haven't seen these mines. So I'm not sure if they're on the trail or if they're buried, basically. This information plinth is empty, and it almost gives me the impression that either they're still building up the information about areas as you go, or possibly that the height of World War I tourism may have passed now that we're past the centennial. And so that'll be interesting to see what will the effect of that be on these towns in terms of their income. I'd spoken earlier about this, that the habitat left by these areas is good for certain animals like amphibians, because the shell holes fill up with water and nobody comes up here. And so what's weird about areas where humans have kind of wrecked the land, it gives an opportunity and some space for nature to reassert itself in whatever way that it will.